Hi, good to see you.
Same here.
Okay. Thank you, Anita, for agreeing to do this talk for us and our students and everyone. Dr. Anita Shantaram has a long history of training and teaching at various important institutions in India as well as abroad. She has completed her PhD in ethical business practices and corporate financial performance from BITS Pilani, and also has an executive education degree program in managing ethics from Bentley University in Boston. She has also been instrumental in setting up the Compliance and Ethics Academy, which runs the certified compliance and ethics professional courses. Currently, Professor Shantaram is associated with NMIMS and IIT Bombay, where she teaches business ethics, and is also a guest faculty to various management institutions, and has been conducting over 1,200 workshops in India, Dubai, and Jordan for various organizations like Larsen Toubro, Tata Group, IDBI, Motorola, Bureau of Veritas, Mast Garments, and many more. My association with Dr. Shantaram has been through a Women in Leaders program, and where she has been extremely insightful in teaching and training young leaders, young women leaders. So with that, I welcome Dr. Anita Shantaram, and I would request our Dean, Professor Sudarshan, who is here today with us, to please express his...
Well, I just want to add, on behalf of the school, a warm welcome to you to join us. We hope that it will not be long when we will have you personally present on campus with our students. So it's not quite the same thing, but we've all converted the Descartes maxim, cogito ergo sum, into cogito ergo zoom. I think, therefore I zoom. We've got to, get back to interpersonal contact. And that's very important in the context of your topic, because both ethics and morality has to do with interpersonal behavior. Morality is, distinct from ethics, and ethics is usually conformity to rules and conducts that are professionally set from an external source. Morality has more to do with one's own individual norms and values by which each person wants to live by. But ethics is a more common standard. And it's useful not to confuse the two and they have two distinct origin words in Greek, ethikos and mor or moralis. And it's a very important subject to focus, especially in a public policy school. I dare say we ought to do more than we have done in terms of emphasizing the importance of ethics. Swetashree's designed a course focusing on it, and we'd like to expose all our students, undergraduates and postgraduate students, to these to ethics in policy making in public policy. Which is another way of putting it which is to train them to use their sense of practical judgment and to make choices that are informed by what would be in the larger interests of the wider group as a habit. So we have some way to go, and so we're very grateful that you've chosen this theme to address us, and we'd be looking to your guidance as we develop courses at different levels, undergraduate, postgraduate, and some more specialized, such as courses on corruption, that need more attention than normally given. And so with those words of gratitude to you for agreeing to speak to us, warm welcome once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, and Swetashri. Thanks for inviting me. And so you can hear me clearly?
Yes.
Before I begin, I usually like to share a little bit of incidents in my life, which has made me move into this space and reinforce that I am in the right space. And I'm so happy to hear that you all are developing courses, because ethics is something that not just for a particular stream or a particular area that needs to be focused. Each and every profession, each and every industry needs to focus on ethics. And that's the foundation of it. So there are three stories that I like to share, three incidents that you can say that have shaped me and shaped my concern for ethics and working in this space. So the first one is that in 2008, December 28th was when BITS Pilani accepted my proposal for my PhD and the thesis on business ethics. And this was 28th December 2008, and something happened in the first week of Jan 2009. If anyone has an answer, you can quickly give that, or I will just share it because we have only an hour for this. So first week of Jan, something happened in the industry in India. That's the Satyam scam. And till then, when I was studying ethics, I would be looking at Enron and WorldCom and all the other ethical scams that took place, financial scams that took place in the world. And this was just 1 week after my PhD being accepted. And it was shocking. It was surprising. It was something that such a large scam had not been unearthed prior to this in the industry. Means, having the MD and the CEO chairman write this to his board that this is something that he has done wrong was a shocker. So this was the first incident which told me, hey, I think I'm on the right path. This is something relevant. This is something very important. So this was the first step. I completed my PhD in 2015. In 2016, I set up my company, Ethics Research and Consulting Private Limited, got my website ready, ethicsindia.com. So obviously, after starting the company, it took me a little bit of time to get my website in place. And November 6th, 2016 was when my website went on, and I put it on LinkedIn and everywhere. And I say, Ethics India goes live. And something happened a day later. And some of you would remember that was the demonetization. And again, I was finding it like, whatever may be the views that others hold, for me, it was a fight against corruption. So I looked at it positively. And my friends were like, every time you do something really, large happens in this space. And again, that was the second step, second incident, which made me realize that, hey, this is, I'm working in something relevant. This is important. And I'm working for the last 29 years, but I changed my line post doing my PhD. And I realized that this is the space that I want to dedicate my life to. Whatever difference I can make, whatever little impact I can make, that's it. Now, the third incident is 2017, my company got acquired by Legasis, which is a leader in compliance management solutions. Joined them. And during this time, my younger daughter went on her exchange program to Belgium. And when you go through this Rotary exchange program, you're not allowed to go and visit them or drop them till the district tells you that yes, you can, and which is usually after 6 months of them being in, and they stay with families, they go to school, and you're hosting somebody else from another country. So I had Emma from Spain. My elder daughter had gone to France. That time I had a German girl with me. So why I'm talking about this particular incident is that when I went to visit her in February 2018, there was a news which broke out in India. And if you remember it, it is the Nirav Modi scam. So you will say it's a long shot, Nirav Modi, Belgium, because he comes from Antwerp, Belgium. And so you would feel that this is not such a close incident. But the shocker or the surprising fact of this is that Nirav Modi was my direct neighbor. We stay on the same floor, 2 flats, one against each other, and that's where he was staying. So my friends are like, hey, you didn't teach Nirav ethics. And I said, no, I'm happy that when I started my PhD, he moved to Samudra Mahal. And this was a flat used by his mom and brother at times whenever they were visiting. So these are three incidents which came very close home or hit me that what I'm doing is relevant, what I'm doing is important, and I need to continue working in this space. I was sure I want to work in this space, but these are things which just reinforce. And I felt that there's a good starting point to make you realize that the universe also sometimes gives you messages which helps you stay on track and helps you stay online. So this is something that I wanted to share with you. I know I'm looking at blank screens. I'm looking at no faces. So I hope I'm reaching out to you the way I hope to reach out to you. So if you look at my slide, I will. So I thought of first just the role that you have. I don't have a very, very detailed understanding of exactly how you would be working and what you all are covering in the course, but we understand it because of the impact that public policy has on all of us and the rules and regulations that get put in, or the systems that come into, or the governmental work that comes in. So I've tried to understand your role a little more, but first I thought that we should just understand what ethics means. And it's a subject, it's so vast, and you can define it in different ways. And I have just taken some simple way of explaining and looked at it as ethics is more than not just giving bribes. It's more than just giving bribes, because that's just part of corruption. If you want to simply define ethics, is that it's the ability to distinguish right from wrong and the commitment to do what is right. In Vittal, he was a chief vigilance commissioner, and I personally have heard him, and I find him absolutely an amazing speaker and highly committed to ethics. And he says that corruption flourishes in India because it's a low risk and a high profit activity. And so these are areas where the policies would make a difference, that how much of zero tolerance that is there if something goes wrong. And so he emphasized that make it high risk and make there zero tolerance against corruption. If you look at World Bank also defining corruption, they define it as use of public office for private gain. So these are ways in which I'm sure that you would be in positions of power, you would be in positions wherein you would be able to influence and maybe make stronger policies against anti-corruption, make it more zero tolerance, so that we get penalized if there is something wrong that happens. Going a little deeper is that ethics is not something that you do when it's convenient or comfortable to do. It's something much more. I have not put the second phrase. It's not something that, you should, it's something that you should live for, even die for. Now, if I put the word die for, everyone's going to be like, that's not what we are studying for, or that's not what we have signed up for. But if you look at whistleblowers, they are willing to stay or put out their lives against something like corruption. Go up and read up about Manjunath and Satyendra Dubey, two young, bright individuals who fought against corruption, ended up losing their lives, but it brought about a change wherein the Whistleblower Act and the Whistleblower Protection Act has come into play. So Socrates, if that's, we talk of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, when we talk of ethics, and he is also someone who, was willing to, though he was put in jail incorrectly, he said that will die, but I will not escape, because that is wrong to do. So that's one extreme of it. I know we all want to be practical, we all want to be sensible, but the thing is that if we do it just because I have not faced any opportunities, or just because I have not come across a situation wherein I can do something wrong and benefit, can I call myself ethical? No, it's going beyond that. It's when we are faced with choices, when we are faced with opportunities, when it is difficult for us to stand by it, when we have to, spend sleepless nights because of the decisions that we end up taking, that's when we can call that we are ethical. Is there a price for our integrity? When I'm not really coming up with great opportunities, or I'm not going to benefit a lot because of doing something wrong, I might choose to do the right thing. But even the temptation is high, or when not the temptation, when the opportunity is high, will I just change the stance? Okay, oh, I am ethical because I'm not getting so much, but when I'm getting a lot, will I get tempted and give in? So is there a tipping point for my ethics? If that is there, I cannot say that I'm operating with ethics. Another quote that I really like, and I felt that it impacted my life a lot, was Martin Luther King Jr., who said that our lives begin to end the moment we are silent about things that matter. And till then, I would always feel that I'm not participating in something wrong. I'm not doing something that is wrong. So I am highly ethical. But watching somebody else do it, is that still, can I still be called ethical? So I'll share a personal story that I'm part of a not-for-profit, and it was working extremely well. But when the patron passed away, then there was a lot of chaos amongst the trustees. And a group of them decided to do something which I felt was not right. They wanted to sell off the property and said that, oh, you know, we will use the money to do the work. But I felt that it's extremely difficult to buy an office, and if you have a space for the trust, we can do so much more work. And I would always go against the resolution that they were trying to pass. And I felt that, fine, you know, I'm being ethical. I feel they are doing wrong, so I'm going against it, and I'm not helping them, supporting them. And then I thought of it, that is that good enough? I'm talking ethics, I'm teaching ethics. And what I can share about is that the more I talk about it, the more I discuss it, the more I read about it, I feel it's led to my own self-transformation. I always believed in it, but now there is more clarity, sometimes to an obsessive level. But every action, I keep assessing that, is it right, is it wrong? And that's a time when I said that, hey, is this good enough? And that's when I realized that, no, I'm just stopping them from not doing something wrong, but I'm not taking any action against them when I'm feeling that they are extremely wrong. And I went to the charity commissioner, I checked with them, and they said, yes, if two trustees feel that something wrong is going on, you can file a case. And so I, spending my own money, my time, effort, went, and because it's a trust, so I'm not going to really benefit from it financially, but I wanted it to continue the good work. Sad part is that there is a stay. At least I've been able to stop them from doing anything, but we've not been able to make more progress, keeping the legal thing in mind. It's just the case is going on for the last 3-4 years, and COVID has not really helped because they've not had any meetings. But I felt that that was a step forward, that if I believe in ethics, did I go out of my way? Did I go out of my comfort zone? And that's something that I would ask each one of you to think, that, you know, are we staying in our comfort zone? Are we just turning a blind eye to things that are going around us? Even if we are not participating in the wrong, are we just turning a blind eye? So I know each one of us may not be able to do it. We may have many other things which are at stake, but the minimum is not participating. But going beyond that is, that's when you can say that, yes, I'm operating with ethics. I like to share this, Hammurabi Code, code of conduct. In the 18th century BC, we had a code of conduct wherein 282 laws were put up by the King Hammurabi in Mesopotamia, and things like minimum wages, innocent till proven guilty, an eye for an eye, was put down as rules for the way that we need to operate. Medical doctors take a Hippocratic oath, so they have some kind of code of conduct. All organizations today, it's mandatory to have a code of conduct, that this is the way we need to operate. I don't think the public policy and policy analysts have a code of conduct, and that's something that maybe you all can create a voluntary code of conduct as to weigh how ethically people in this role need to operate. Because in fact, I would say that as part of public policy, you can have the largest impact, because the decisions or the policies that are taken impact each one of us. We are impacted by it, whether, so this is the space wherein you can say that this is the way a public policy professional is going to operate. And it can be a voluntary guideline, it can be a voluntary code of conduct, it can be your institute taking this initiative to set it up. Because if it's not mandatory, I feel at least a voluntary code is something that we should all sign up for. What also I feel is that it's not just for a public policy professional, but for everyone, but here even more so, having a sense of integrity. What is integrity? It's literally saying and doing what you say you will do and sticking by and doing the right thing. A competence, having the ability and sticking by it and being able to do what you say you will do. Responsibility, taking onus for whatever has to be done. Respect. See, it's easy for us to respect people who are similar to us, who we know or we can identify with. But when you are initiating a policy for people who may be marginalized sections, or maybe people who you have no idea or no relation with, at that point of time, having respect would really help design policies which would be taking everyone or taking that particular section, even though of people, even though you personally don't know them, and having concern and care and welfare for humanity. So these are very 5 basic principles that individuals need to have, but more so as a public policy professional. Very quickly, I hope you will participate in this. You don't need to give me the answers, but there'll be 5 incidents given, and you can read that and choose answer A, B, or C. I will not be asking you to share the answers, but you can do this as a quick self-assessment of how do you take decisions or understand a little more about ethics. So read it and just pick up A, B, or C. I'm moving to the next one. Next one. Now the 4th. The last one. So if you've chosen A, B, or C, so you can just get a feel of whether you have chosen more of A's, more of B's, or more of C's, and this will help you understand. If you've chosen more of A's, means you have certain principles or you have an inner moral compass. You have clarity about the values that are important to you. If you have picked up more of B, then you tend to look at society as to what does society think of it as right or wrong. And if you picked up more of C, you tend to go by laws and rules. If it's legal, it's fine, I'll do it. If it's not legal, I will not do it. But you will not look at going beyond legality. So to some extent, though there's a self-assessment, it's a very quick one, so we may not be absolutely accurate, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of, do you have clarity of your values and principles, or do you tend to look outside, or do you tend to just wait for laws and rules? And that's why you must ask your question to yourself, that do you Is there self-regulation which you can go by, or are you always waiting for the government, or you expect policies to be put in place which would ban or make things mandatory? Because a more evolved way of approaching is self-regulation, but I think many of us are not mature enough, and that's why we expect policies and rules to be put in place which would make things mandatory or make things in that we have to operate in a certain way. And self-regulation may not necessarily work for a lot of us. But wherever there are no policies, wherever there are no rules, with greater awareness and greater insight, we can look at operating and managing or controlling ourselves through self-regulation. So if a lot of you picked up going by sea and going by what is legal, there are times that something that is legal may not necessarily be ethical also. And if any question comes to your mind, or we have questions at the end of the session, and feel free to put that, or if anyone wants to write it, and I'm sure someone can read that out to me. So as simple as when you're laying off people in an organization, legally, that's allowed. But how you go about doing it reflects the ethics. Years ago, slavery was legal, but do you think at any point of time it was ethical? As Sir very nicely distinguished between ethics and morals, we tend to use ethics, morals, values interchangeably, but each one of them has a different meaning. And values, when we talk of, is something that motivates us. It's something that we want to live by. I like the way we can distinguish this as values sets priorities. It motivates us. So values sets priorities, and ethics sets boundaries. It tells us, don't cross this line, don't cross this, you may be in the gray zone, but there is a line that we must not cross. So ethics sets boundaries and values sets priorities. So when you're looking at public policy, when you look at ethics, it's all about making choices. We make choices, and at that point of making choices, the impact or the consequences that arise out of it. And as part of public policy, you would be taking decisions or making choices which would impact our rights, our freedom, our society, all of that. So we need to keep in mind that ethics is at the base of making a decision. But there's a concept of ethical fading, which indicates that ethics no longer becomes a dimension in our decision-making process. Most business schools, most of our educational system helps us take decisions as a cost-benefit analysis. We look at what are the costs, what are the benefits, and then we take a decision. But when we are taking these costs and benefits, we do not put ethics as one of the dimensions. Very rarely is that done so. So as a fundamental of any policy that we're taking, we need to put ethics as one of the dimensions in taking decisions. If I ask you the question, are we born ethical or do we learn to be ethical? A lot of you would say we learn to be ethical. Is it too late to learn to be ethical? I personally feel that there is no time limit to learning to be ethical. But yes, of course, our initial grounding years, the way our parents have dealt with us, the way our school, our peers, our teachers deal with us would give us greater clarity and give us a foundation of that. But this amazing study by Yale University, and you can see it on YouTube. There's a video of 13 minutes called Born Good. And it shows that a lot of the right things are inherently there in us. So we already have ethics in us. We are born with it. And I think it further gets reinforced or reduced or re-emphasized by the behavior of others around it. But we are also born with certain biases. We are also born with certain limitations, which causes prejudice and bias. So very, very interesting video. Please do watch it if you want to understand more about surprising data in terms of how we are born with ethics. So when you look at ethical theories, why do we need to understand an ethical theory? I'll not get into full details of it. I'll explain a few of the ethical theories which will be relevant to you. Theory gives us a framework. A framework helps us understand how we tend to take decisions and what can be the kind of impact with certain decisions and what are the consequences. So generally, when I know this sounds a little tedious whenever we have to hear a theory, but very, very simply, I will put it very simply, and I'll only talk of a few important points, is there are two different schools of thought or two different aspects of theories or two different kinds of theories. What happens is that one looks at the consequence and one looks at the process. So consequential and non-consequential. So when you're talking of consequential, it's looking at taking a decision based on the kind of consequences that you'll arrive. So utilitarian theory, greater good for greater number of people. If it benefits people, let's take this decision. So now if you have public policy and looking at greater good, but then the limitation is that it would harm some, or we are not really sure how we can assess or quantify the results. And non-consequential theory is that it's not looking at the outcome, but it's looking at the process. So wrong is wrong, even if by telling that, or a white lie or a lie which will benefit someone, we say, let's not do the wrong, or let's not process, follow the right processes. I'm not going to get into the details of this. If it's of interest, do read up more on it. But here, utilitarianism, greatest good for greater number of people, and deontology is looking at the process. I'll just talk a little bit about virtue ethics, because generally when I like to talk of it, I like to talk of utilitarian theory, deontological theory, and then talk of virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is talking about what is the kind of person we want to do. What's the kind of person we want to be? How do we want to be known? How do we want people to look at us? That this is a man of character. This is a person with integrity. So that's virtue ethics, and that's proposed by Aristotle. Aristotle very nicely said that a man is not called virtuous, or a man or a woman is not called virtuous because that he's virtuous, so he's going to act rightly. He acts rightly, hence we call him virtuous. So it's not something that we give, that he's a virtuous man, so he's going to act rightly. It's because his behavior over a period of time has been acting rightly, and hence we call the person a person of virtues. So especially looking at it from the public policy, most of the time you would have to look at these three ways or approaches to take putting a policy in the forefront. So one is universalism, wherein everyone's going to be impacted by it. So we say that if we want something to be done, only if it is good for everyone should we allow that to happen. So if I want to give you an example, that I want a loan, I know I cannot repay it, so I'm going to break the promise. So I will give a fake promise and I'll get the loan, and then I will not end up paying it. Now, universalism is that if everyone does this, is it going to be okay? So if everyone starts breaking promise, there will be no value to promise. So we need to keep that in mind, that if everyone does it, will it still be fine? Then we need to go ahead. Utilitarian is that if you feel that it's going to give a huge benefit, some of us may end up paying a price for it, but a lot of people are going to benefit. So taxing higher percentage for wealthier, so that the socially or economically disadvantaged would benefit, becomes keeping utilitarianism in mind. And altruism is keeping those who are really disadvantaged, keeping them in the forefront, and taking a decision. So, when you are deciding which policies would help or benefit, you would end up taking any of these as factors to justify your position. I like this quote, which came in the same. If you look at it's in the paper Doing Ethical Policy Analysis. It's an interesting paper which you can read, and very nicely said that human betterment is a gradual 2-step forward and a 1-step back effort. So every decision that is made doesn't mean that it's only going to take us forward. At times it does take us, but as long as it takes us 2 steps forward and it takes 1 step backward, and forgive others for their wrongdoing and keep trying to do your best. That's all that we can do. I think we can only try to do our best. Sometimes we do not realize the impact of our decisions. I'll leave this out. But if you look at putting ethics in taking a decision, defining the problem, checking what are the alternatives and testing them against ethics. So what are the criteria on the basis of which you will judge? And keeping ethics as one of the factors, looking at the outcomes and going ahead with that. So here nicely, 2 examples we have put down is, I think the whole policy about vaccination and which groups have to be vaccinated first would have that. Coming up with that policy itself would have been extremely difficult, and I know we all would have had differing views. So states' duty is to provide vaccines free of cost to all, but when the vaccines are limited in number, what policy decision must the state take? So do you follow the utilitarian, greater happiness for greater number of people, care ethics that is focusing on the worst hit or the people with comorbidities, or how we decided that the frontline warriors would be focused first, or focusing on individual interests, first come first serve basis, or they could have put it at a huge price and says whoever can afford to pay it can come up. So these are how do you take these decisions? How do you come up with this policy? The government has come up with a policy. A lot of us have a difference of opinion in that. Like for me, I look at it that it should have been maybe the working class rather than the oldest age being hit first, because they are the ones who need to go out, and they're the ones who, if they don't bring in the money, maybe their parents they would have to look after. So all of us would have a different opinion, but the government or the policymakers had to put something, take various opinions or various thought processes and come up with it. The latest newest thing is about the OTT platforms. And the other day I was moderating a session on in the entertainment and the real estate sector. And they have come up with the ethics code, because we have a censor board for our movies, but the same thing, what's not allowed in a movie, huge amount is allowed on the OTT platform. But now the government has put down certain rules, regulations, there's an ethics code, and that to what extent and what are you allowed to show, and to what extent you have to self-regulate, or how you have to control that children cannot be exposed to certain information, and or how we had the adult certificate. Now all that needs to also come out very clearly on the OTT platform. So these are all policies which the government comes up with, and you all are going to be part of various sectors wherein you would be working on different things. When they allow the OTT platform to operate in absolute, the manner that they wanted to, and now we realize the impact of it, and we are. So you have to be careful with the kind of policies, and maybe they can be more proactive in nature rather than reactive and coming up after everything goes. So we say ultimately that there is no right way to do a wrong thing. And I like this quote, which would be relevant for each one of you, is nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. And as public policy professionals, there is going to be a lot of power, but will we use that for the betterment of society, or sometimes we are so far away from it that we look at it in isolation, or we tend to look at it in what is just reinforcing what maybe the political parties want or the government wants, and not looking at it as for the betterment of humanity. So I'm ending with that, and I'm leaving myself, some time open for questions that you may have. I hope it's opened your mind to some kind of thinking in the space of ethics.
Well, thank you very much. That was fascinating. There's no doubt that we need to spend a lot of time on this, particularly when we are training a new generation of people who are going to go into public life in various walks of life. It's not necessarily that they would all be policymakers inside government, but it's important to have some strong foundations in ethics. When I started as the dean of this school, my inspiration really was to make public policy a noble profession. You made a reference to the Hippocratic Oath. Medicine is a noble profession because medicine has, a set of ethics that guide professionals. Their main objective is to heal people and not to discriminate against anyone, regardless of whether they are rich or poor, can afford to pay or not pay. You must save lives, that kind of thing. So it's called a noble profession. The law is called a noble profession, somewhat ironically, I would think, in this day and age. But that is because its lawyers are meant to be in a quest for justice. I mean, they are technically defined as officers of the court. Yes, they have clients. They must do their best by their clients. But that does not mean that they should indulge in lying from day one. And unfortunately, in our adversarial legal system, both parties begin with lies and prolong cases and don't really seriously wish to settle disputes. There are all kinds of problems, ethical problems. But nonetheless, the law was regarded as a noble profession because its quest is justice. Now, in the same spirit, I'd like public policy to be regarded as a profession, a noble profession, a practice like medicine or law, because it is meant for the public good. You are meant to, so the analogy I like to use to my students is to say, you play a game of chess or you play cricket. You play the game because you're not playing the game because you will get a prize at the end of it, or you'll get more money or less money. You may well win a tournament, but you do it because there are internal standards that motivate you to do it. Excellence in playing the game well is what matters. The external goods, the fact that you may win some money or get recognition, is external to the enjoyment of the game and the purpose of the game, right? So I would like to regard public policy to develop as a practice as well as become a noble profession in the true sense of the term. And we can do this. We haven't done this. We have never had public policy education in the country till very recently. And that's because policy making was regarded as a closed shop monopoly concern of only those who are already in the civil services at a high echelon. And that's all changed. Government is more open, is more willing to acquire knowledge and outsource some of the evidence that it needs for policy making to other institutions. So a lot of employment opportunities are opened up. But that's why it's very critical to have solid ethical foundations in what our students do, and to explain it in different ways. One way to talk about consequentialism and non-consequentialism is the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. In the Gita, Arjuna is a consequentialist. He says no good will come of it. In fact, he turned out to be right. At the end of the Mahabharata, no good does come. A lot of people have died and there's sadness. and misery. But on the other hand, doing what is the right thing for you to do is the emphasis that Krishna gives in that context. And so you can see that you have to make a contextual judgment here. The way I see it is Arjuna had a very solid argument, but he was hit by shock and awe because Krishna just didn't use reason in his argument, but he also demonstrated that he is such a supreme power by the Vishwarupa. So that kind of influenced Arjuna's final decision. But it's all contextual in the sense. And so I'm very grateful to you for, to come in this semester and talk to us. And we want you to come back and do more of this kind of a thing. And I'll encourage my faculty also to have in every course, really, not just teach ethics as one course in which you do it, but in every course, whether you're looking at public finance or you're looking at public health, or you're looking at education policy, in all of these, there are ethical considerations that must be incorporated into the curriculum the way we teach it. And so we'd be very grateful to have some kind of a institutional partnership with your organization and look ahead to strengthening this part of, as you say, character building in people. Because at the end of the day, our students will forget what we teach them in class, but what the education would do is to make them a certain kind of person. And if we want them to become a certain kind of person with a solid grounding in values and ethics, we need to, think of it all the time and not just, one part of the day. And so thank you very much, Dr. Anita Shantaram. I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Professor Sudarshan. Thanks, Anita. I now would request others to, if you have any questions, please, you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask. I see some students here. Would you like to go ahead and ask?
Ma'am, yes, I do have a question in mind.
Yeah, please go ahead, Sitra.
Yeah, ma'am. Like I'm a little bit confused between what is being ethical and what is being positively discrimination. So being ethical and being positively discriminate. So yeah, I was just looking this at a point of view from the caste dynamic. So yeah, from that view.
I don't know if I understood your question clearly. You're saying positive discrimination and ethics.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
So something like caste. So whether that is ethical.
Yeah.
Now, that's something which, whenever we talk of ethics, we say eliminate things which are, whether it's religious or whether systems and processes have already been put in place. There are things which are not right. So caste as a system is not an ethical situation to be in. So in the same way, if you look at today, there is so many different kind of, if you look at all organizations, they say we don't discriminate on the basis of caste or gender or sexual orientation, race, so many different things. So all of that would reflect ethics if you are not discriminating on the basis of that. So you ought not to be discriminating on the basis of that. That's already become as past history. As part of history, we have been, we are set up with that. So we have accepted it, but you cannot discriminate on the basis of that. So only then can you say you're ethical. If you're discriminating, but the whole thing about reservation and, so we all have mixed feelings about it. Means I personally am not at all for a reservation for women, or it can be reservation for socially disadvantaged, but there is enough justification when it comes out as an argument as to how the disadvantaged sections need that support to be able to come to a level playing field. So opinions would differ, but so this whole fundamental is that there should be no discrimination. So I don't know if I did answer your question.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I could get it. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. We have a question from another student. How do you react to decisions that requires a trade-off?
So that's, I think when you look at the utilitarian theory itself, when you look at consequence or you look at greater, so you say greater good and you take a decision on trade-off. Now, able to end a lockdown, which will result in some level of deaths. Yeah, so it's extremely challenging, and you always try to say, so here I'm sure that they have looked at it from the utilitarian theory, that for a larger number of people, is it going to be if we have deaths, then yeah, what is your financial security at the end of it if you don't even exist? So trying to get the lesser evil, or the something that would help a larger number of people. Again, we may disagree and say that a larger number of people are below poverty line, so they are the ones who need the support, they are the ones. But I think the government did take action and support. At least, like I kept asking my driver that, have you been getting, I've been paying him, but then I said, what the government has been promising about food and ration. He's saying completely consistently, we have got all the food grains and things like that. So it's a challenging decision whenever you're trading off. Here, a person, when they take that decision, they would look at it that for a greater benefit for a larger number, some would end up paying a price for it, but a larger number of people would benefit. And that's how. So again, we would have difference of opinion. Like I felt, yes, it was a good decision, but I'm sure that there were daily wage laborers and daily, that was extremely challenging, but a lot of people rose up to the situation to support them. But yes, some end up paying a price. So it's after all the policymakers who have taken this decision, and they've tried to go for the best trade-off. But you can never win all, is what you can say.
Yeah, the greatest good of the greatest number, probably somehow the greatest good thing was not in line. I think that was missing from this lockdown, because that, like, if you ask me, I think it was more the epidemiologist or the immunologist who were consulted rather than a sociologist, or like where they completely forgot the, like, I somehow can't think of it as an act utilitarian kind of a principle, like a policy which is based on act utilitarianism, that okay, the consequence matters, and consequentially it didn't do too much, like I think many of us would be agreeing to this point, that how could they just really not think about the migrant workers on whose shoulders the entire edifice of globalization is standing? How they could have planned, they didn't need to announce the plan in advance, but that plan could have been there within the closed doors, and could have been executed. They could have arranged the buses before this havoc started, but they're completely oblivious. They shut their eyes and they didn't didn't realize. Like they need more of those sociologists, anthropologists, and people who are, Professor Sudarshan, I think we need more people who are trained in multidisciplinary, approaches.
So, in answer to the question about trade-offs, I'd just like to point out that, the trade-offs are not really always very stark and black and white. Now, think of the Narmada Sagar matter, right? It was, there were about 200,000 tribals who would have lost their place of livelihood. And it's not simply a piece of land. It's for them a sacred place. Their ancestors and their gods live there. And so it's just more than, moving from one plot of land to another as far as the tribal groups were concerned. But then the Narmada Sagar Dam is meant to benefit some 3 million people. So the decision of the government was clearly utilitarian. But on the other hand, you couldn't say, okay, we'll sacrifice 200,000 tribals for 3 million people. That looks like the trade-off, but that needn't be the terms of the trade-off. If we'd only paid a little more attention to, firstly, examining whether these big, large dams are the best thing to do. It's a prior question before you decide on a dam. And now the evidence around the world is that, big dams are not very good. Big dams silt up. Big dams cause all kinds of problems down the line, and the expected benefits don't show up. So there's all that evidence that could have been taken into account. There's also a question of consulting and getting the consensus of people, because it's not that people are going to be unreasonable and say, it shouldn't happen at all. But there was no effort made to consult the public. So one of the lessons in public policy is consult the public. The policy is meant to benefit a set of people. Talk to them first as to whether, what you wish to do is going to be beneficial to them. Not that they would understand. For instance, a nuclear plant, the general public won't know whether a nuclear plant is safe or not safe, whether a water-cooled reactor is better than some other kind of reactor. That's scientific engineering knowledge. They may not have that, but they will know about what is their tolerance limit to risk, and weigh up what it would be benefit the country. So each person, an ordinary person, can make that judgment. I am much too afraid. I think this is a very high risk thing, nuclear plant, even though it's a very low probability, as you are assuring me. Nonetheless, I think it's a risk I'm not prepared to take in my backyard. Now, but then you need to engage in a dialogue and discussion, because there is no trade-off that is simply stark. That's my point. That
Yes.
you could always find ways by which you can come to a kind of a compromise on the ethical choices you need to make. So if only the tribals had been consulted, and if only, we politicized it so much that the Narmada Bachao Andolan would not let other NGOs go to talk to the tribals about what kind of resettlement and rehabilitation would they like to have. The dam is coming. You are damned as far as that goes. Now, let us talk about how we could make your lives better. But it got so politicized as no dam at all. And that group was so vehement that they prevented others who are more, who thought, okay, this is going to happen. You may not be on the road to hell, but hell is going to be on the road to you. So now what are you going to do, right? Now that wasn't done. So we need to be a little more consultative, a little more understanding, and not just say, everything is black and white, because we're all living in shades of gray for much of the time. And we need to appreciate the pros and cons, and we need to appreciate why is one stance being advanced and why is that stance being opposed, and then in between, what can we do? So I feel very bad about the tribals of Narmada, not because but because their rehabilitation and resettlement has been so badly managed that many of them have been uprooted 2, 3, 4 times in the course of 10, 20 years. And that shouldn't happen. That's what I'd say. So it's a public policy responsibility to make sure that that kind of a thing doesn't happen, that we find that trade-offs are seen as contexts where we have to look at possible solutions, possible ameliorative solutions. So in all policy making, somebody will be hurt and somebody will be benefiting. But you can always do something about the extent to which somebody benefits. and the extent to which somebody gets hurt. Right now, there you have a moral or an ethical choice to make.
Thank you, Professor Sudarshan and Anita. Rithiman has a question which is kind of a follow-up with what Professor Sudarshan was saying. Rithiman, would you like to unmute yourself? It's more about politicization of ethics or the trade-offs that we talked about. Rithiman, can you, is it okay to unmute? Yeah,
Yes.
hi. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know if, based on so many theories are there, right? So any action could be explained based on one or the other of these theories. So does this make ethics as a discipline vulnerable to abuse by, let's say, people in power, or maybe it could also impede the process of reaching to an intended outcome owing to the disharmony of opinions that it could generate, because there are multiple theories, which would support or refute opinions.
That's a good question. Very simply put, yes, you can very use as simply as, if you look at salespeople, they look at, compare it to last year's sales. If it benefits them, they will look at the previous quarter if it benefits them. So you can always use it to justify it or to help understand. So ethics can be done. But there are some absolute ethical behaviors which are non-negotiable. And if you look at whether freedom or respect or human rights, violation of that. So if you look at all of those fundamental, there are a few which are so fundamental, and that those are things which you cannot ever justify through using a variety of theories. Yes, you can use that generally, but some universal rules, some universal laws. And I personally say, going by absolute ethics, or, a right is right, like even if nobody is doing it, wrong is wrong, even if everybody is doing it, So if you go by that philosophy, you may not be able to make excuses by, making it a situation based all the time, or making it contextual, or making it relative. So that's all. As simply as even I say that, yes, there are grays, but look at things a little more as black and white may help us take clearer and stronger decisions, rather than putting everything in the gray and justifying it that, it's we can't really have a clarity on taking a decision. So that's how I can simply put, but I'm sure if Swetashri or
No, I agree with you. Sometimes you really have to go by certain, like just take what is right, even if nobody is doing it. But as policymakers, very rarely you come across such situations where you can really say that, okay, I will displace these people, because ultimately here a lot of power will be generated, which is going to help, or like help our power shortage problem. But or make a road and displace the tribals, the people, indigenous people who are living there. But it is very difficult to take such decisions. As I said, that Rithiman, like to answer your question as well, like following Anita, that of course it's politicized. The trade-offs are politicized, as Professor Sudarshan just said, that the trade-offs were put in such a way that even if the tribal people could have been managed better, the whole situation, the outcome could have been better. But whatever happens in our country specifically, everything gets politicized, right? Even if somebody dies, everything is politicized, which we can just leave it at its face value. We don't get to do that.
Yeah.
So
but I'd like to just endorse what Dr. Shantaram said. There are contexts where there cannot be, these are choices we make in public policy. That's true. But, should government lie to people, right? Now, there's a clear answer to that question. The government should not lie to people. Now, directly saying a lie to people is one thing, but suppressing information that is inconvenient to the government is ethically wrong. not releasing a national sample survey because the data might show the government in poor light when it comes to unemployment is wrong. Now, on those things, we can take a clear stance, right? Other contexts where, the choice is not so clear, but there are certain ethical principles in terms of the government, is meant to serve the people. It is accountable to the people in a democracy, and therefore it shouldn't pull wool over people's eyes in any form, either by directly engaging in some propaganda or by suppressing information that may be inconvenient to it. And this holds good not just for government, it holds good with corporations with respect to its shareholders, with respect to its customers. And so on certain matters, I think I would agree with Dr. Shantaram, there's no choice to be made there. I mean, either you're right or you're not right. I mean, so there are a number of contexts in that, and particularly when it comes to issues related to corruption. It's a little more difficult when you say, should a public servant or a minister favor people in his constituency rather than somewhere else? Now there it becomes a little more difficult to say whether it's right or wrong, because you see, we tend to do good for people we know. I mean, Immanuel Kant talks about this. For someone we don't know who's a stranger, we have a moral duty to not harm them. But we cannot in the same way care for them as we would do for someone who is close to us, whom we know, right? So you cannot say that you're caring for your own kind. I mean, this is something in our segmented society, we have a problem, right? Or you're caring for your village and your kith and kin and so on. But it's really part of human nature to do that. It's more difficult to care for strangers, and it's more difficult to deny help to someone who's your neighbor in your immediate purview. So these are the ways by which we have to judge contexts, right? But
Illusion we lost towards the end. Would you like to?
You're on mute.
Vivek had his
Yeah.
hand up, that's why.
Yeah, that's why. Oh, yeah, he's waiting. Yes, Vivek.
Thank you, Dr. Shantaram, for a very, very interesting thoughts. I have two quick questions. One is, are certain industries or certain sectors of the economy more prone for ethical transgression? For example, let's say finance or pharma, or let's say real estate. And if that is the case, how can public policies help them to stay within the boundaries beyond regulation? That's the question. The second question is that in our life, we wear different hats, of a parent or an employer or employee, different kinds of hats we wear, and each of these hats comes with their own ethical requirements. And if these ethical requirements, let us say, start conflicting with each other, is there a hierarchy amongst the ethics? Thank you.
Very interesting question, both of them. Let me take the first one. When you're saying that, are there particular industries where there is more ethical transgressions? What comes out in the open a lot is the financial scams, because that's usually because you can see the numbers, and finance or money is always extremely important. So that's what tends to get highlighted. But wherever there is a lot of, I would say, government interface, or where you're having to deal with countries which do not have strong regulations, those are areas wherein there are likely to be more ethical transgressions. But I would say that across industries, across situations, you can have an educational institute, you can have a manufacturing, you can have an NGO. If there are no right systems, if the tone at the top is not pro-ethics, you can have it across. So you don't need to say, but when you brought up real estate, yes. And things like RERA and all of that has helped a lot. But you're saying beyond regulation, what are there more? So you can have it a lot in the manufacturing setup when they're trying to set up industries in countries which, the transparency index, the perception index.
Yes.
So you have countries wherein, we are in the middle, but there are countries which are highly ethical. There are countries which are not. So if you're dealing with those which don't have strong regulations, so they're going to be more. So industry, yes, to some extent, but I would still like to lead it more to the kind of systems that are put in place. What's the kind of founder there? So you may have a pharmaceutical industry, which is completely ethical, and you may have an NGO, which is not ethical. So I would say don't leave it to the industry, but leave it to the kind of people and systems that are put in place as more. But we tend to highlight financial scams more than others. The other one was, you're saying, is there a hierarchy because we play different rules? See, the whole, I set up this whole company and I decided to do work in the space of ethics and business ethics for organizations. Why did I look at that? Is I felt that as individuals, we can justify, if I try to work with individuals, it would be extremely challenging and time consuming and may not be able to impact a lot of people. But if I look at an organization, and if the organization builds up on their ethical practices, they would impact their employees. Employees may operate in that manner with their family, with their community, and it would get passed on or would have a larger impact. So that was my basis. You may think that someone is ethical at home but is unethical at workplace, possibly. So if there are better systems, there's one very interesting data which said that 80% of people operating in a corporate capacity took a decision that 97% of them felt to be morally wrong. So I felt it was morally wrong, but I still did it when I thought of it as part of the organization, because you would know maybe pressure for delivering, pressure for results, maybe no good role models, or you are not going to get penalized. You think you're doing it to benefit the organization. So yes, there is a difference, but I would say that if organizations operate ethically and we emphasize, you're able to even if I, for assumption's sake, I tend to go towards the unethical behavior. I very easily choose to do the wrong thing. But if I'm a part of a system which has very good rules and would, penalize or have zero tolerance against wrongdoing, I would not operate unethically there. So I lay a good amount of emphasis. Maybe this is my bias in its own way, but this is my belief that if we are able to do that, we would be able to, because inherently most of us are good. Most of us don't want to do the right thing, but sometimes the systems give us the leeway or give us that option. So if the place that we spend the maximum amount of time, which is our workplace, brings up ethical behavior, we may. So I hope this answers some part of your question. And you may be ethical at home, but you may not end up being ethical at workplace. But if ethical at workplace may translate to more, because we do prefer to be ethical. Most of us would want to be ethical. I don't think most of us would want to be unethical. Yeah, so Vivek, I don't know to what extent I was able to answer your question, but if there's something you want to take it further from that, from whatever I've said, feel free to do that to help me give you the some more clarity.
No, I think it helps us to think. Yeah, I think yes. Thanks.
Thank
Great.
you.
We are already over time.
Okay.
So
yeah, wow.
Yeah, if no one has any questions, I'll request Professor Sudarshan to say a few words to close the session.
I just have to Thank you for this session. We see quite evidently, unlike many things that we teach that end up boring students, one thing you can guarantee, a discussion on ethics will never be boring and will always be provocative and make people think. So that's another good reason to have more of such dialogues in our school and in the university as a whole. And generally, it's I think it's needed in the times that we are now living in, when it's post-truth. Leaders of many countries don't bat an eyelid before telling the public blatant lies and getting away with it because they have, a set of hardcore followers who think that the king can do no wrong. I think these are times when we need to sensitize ourselves and our students. It's our ethical responsibility to do it. So thank you, Dr. Shantaram, for being with us today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Anita. Thank you, everyone.